What if the person you love asked you to cut ties with the only friend who helped you survive your darkest days? Would you obey, or would you fight back? That's the question that's been haunting me. If you're listening right now, I want you to imagine this. You've lost the love of your life. The woman you married, the mother of your child, gone. Not because of a fight, not because of a divorce, but because life itself decided to tear her away. The year was 2021, when the world was still bleeding from a virus that took millions. It took my wife too. I was 24 at the time. My son was barely learning how to speak. One morning, I walked into a hospital room, and by evening, I walked out alone, carrying not just the weight of grief, but also the terrifying reality of being a single father. Those days were unbearable. The walls of my house felt like a prison. The silence at night was the kind that eats you alive. There were times I looked at my little boy sleeping, and I thought, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to raise him without the woman I thought I'd grow old with? And that's where she comes in. Zara. I've known Zara since I was 7 years old. Back when her family moved next door and we bonded over things kids shouldn't have to bond over, parents fighting. Houses that didn't feel like homes. The kind of childhood you spend trying to escape from instead of cherish. If you saw us together, you'd probably think we were siblings. People always did. Same sarcastic humor, same unfiltered way of speaking, same invisible scars. When my mum died years ago, Zara was the one who held my hand at the funeral when my own relatives didn't know what to say. When my wife died in 2021, she was there again. She showed up at my door with food, with her husband beside her, with open arms for my son who adored her like an aunt. There were nights she picked him up, took him to the park, just so I could sit in the dark and cry without scaring him. So when I say I love Zara, it's not the kind of love people like to gossip about. It's the kind of love you feel for a sister who saw you at your lowest and never once looked away. Fast forward a few years. Time passes. Wounds don't heal completely, but they scar over, and you learn how to breathe again. I met someone, Sarah, and for the first time since 2021, I felt like maybe, just maybe, life was giving me a second chance. Sarah is. She's warm. She's beautiful. She made me believe in love again when I thought my heart was buried 6 feet under with my wife. She accepted my son. She brought laughter back into the house. And when I asked her to marry me, I meant every word. I wanted forever with her. But here's the problem. Sarah doesn't like Zara now. If you're rolling your eyes thinking of course she doesn't, trust me, thought the same at first. I figured not everyone has to click. People can just be cordial, polite, and move on. But it's not like that. Because when I told Sarah that I wanted Zara to stand by my side at the wedding, not just as a guest, but as my best woman, she said no. Not just no. I'd rather not. Not just no. It makes me uncomfortable. But flat out no. She said she didn't want Zara in the wedding party at all. I remember sitting there, completely stunned. I thought maybe she didn't want Zara wearing a dress that would clash with the bridesmaids. So I said, she can wear a suit. She fit right in with the groomsmen. But Sarah still said no. She told me she didn't want people to get the wrong impression about me. And let me tell you something, that sentence cut deeper than I thought it would. Because what wrong impression could there possibly be? That I'm close to a woman who has been in my life since I was 7? That I have a best friend who isn't a man? That I'm loyal to someone who saved me from drowning in grief? To me, those aren't wrong impressions. They're the truth. I tried to explain that Zara is like family, that she's married, that she's never crossed a line, not once. But Sarah wouldn't listen. She got frustrated, stopped speaking to me, and before I knew it, her friends were whispering behind my back, saying, "Oh, there must be something going on between them." You know what hurts the most? Not that strangers assumed the worst, not that Sarah's friends judged me, but that Sarah, the woman I wanted to spend my life with, didn't trust me enough to see past her own jealousy. And then came the text that shattered everything I thought I knew about her, because Sarah admitted that her problem with Zara wasn't just jealousy. It was deeper, uglier. She said things about Zara that I can't repeat without my voice shaking. She called her rude, condescending, not normal. She mocked her voice. Her mannerisms, things Zara can't change because she's on the spectrum. And then, almost casually, Sarah admitted she didn't want a Muslim woman standing beside me at the altar. Islamophobia, ableism, jealousy, wrapped up in one neat little confession. And suddenly, the woman I thought was my forever didn't look so perfect anymore. So now I'm here, caught between two women, one who gave me life again after tragedy, and one who saved me when I thought life wasn't worth living. This story isn't about picking sides. It's about love and friendship and the kind of choices that define who we really are. Stay with me, because this is not just a wedding story. This is a story about what happens when the people you love the most force you to choose and what it costs to stay true to yourself. There are memories you wish you could erase, but no matter how hard you try, they cling to you. They haunt you every time you close your eyes. For me, that memory is the winter of 2021, the year the whole world trembled, and the year I lost everything. My wife was admitted to the hospital on a cold December day. At first, it was just a cough, some fatigue. We thought she only needed a few days of rest and she'd be fine. But we were wrong. The illness wasn't gentle. It wasn't merciful. I still remember the trembling in my hands as I signed the admission papers, feeling as though I had just handed the woman I loved most over to fate itself. She lay there, surrounded by machines that beeped rhythmically, each sound a cruel reminder of how fragile life had become. I sat by her side, hidden behind a mask, but I could still see her, eyes tired, but determined. She tried to smile, whispering, "I'll be okay." Her hand, weak and cold, held mine. I nodded, but inside, fear was growing like a black shadow, swallowing me whole. By the third day, the doctors started talking numbers, probabilities, lung damage, percentages of recovery. Their words blurred together until I couldn't make sense of them. I only remember praying, over and over, even though I had never been a religious man. I begged any higher power that might exist, please let her come home. Please let my son still have his mother. But no one answered that day. The light in my life went out. Walking out of the hospital alone is a feeling you can't possibly understand until you've lived it yourself. I held my son in my arms, too young to grasp what was happening. He looked up at me and asked, "Where's Mummy?" I had no answer. I just held him tighter, while tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. The weeks that followed felt unbearable. The house was suffocatingly empty. Every corner carried traces of her, a coat still hanging on the chair, a half-finished cup of coffee on the counter, the faint scent of her perfume in our bedroom. Nights became endless. I would sit on the floor, my head in my hands, feeling like I was being torn apart from the inside. I knew I had to be strong for my son. But how could I? I had just lost half of myself. My anchor, my best friend. My son looked at me with innocent eyes, while I stumbled through cooking bland meals and tried to distract him with toys. But inside, I was drowning. There were moments I was afraid of myself, afraid that I would let go completely, that I'd disappear. But every time I watched my son sleep, I realized I couldn't collapse. He needed me, and I needed someone to pull me back up. That someone was Zara. I didn't even have to call, she just showed up. Zara didn't ask questions, didn't offer pity. She simply brought a bag of hot food, set it on the table, and scooped my son up like he was her own nephew. Eat. You can't just sit there like this. Her voice was always low and flat, but behind every word was a kind of care no one else could give. Some days she came with her husband. He would take my son to the park, giving me space to be alone. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to really cry, to scream into my hands, to break down in a way I couldn't in front of my son. And when the tears were gone, Zara returned, silently placing a glass of water in front of me. She didn't lecture, didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed. She just sat there. And somehow, that was enough. Slowly, the suffocating darkness around me began to loosen, not because the grief vanished, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. I had someone beside me, someone who didn't run away from my weakness. People always say, men have to be strong, but the truth is, without Zara, I would have fallen apart. One night, after a long day of my son crying endlessly, Zara came over. She took him into her arms, rocked him gently until he drifted off to sleep. Then she looked at me and said, "You don't have to pretend to be okay all the time. Let me handle this for a while." That night, I slept for the first time in months. I dreamed of my wife. She was smiling, standing at a distance, her face soft and kind. I felt like she was telling me, "You're not alone. Someone is here to help you." When I woke up, I saw Zara slumped on the sofa, my son sleeping peacefully in her lap. And in that moment, I knew Zara wasn't just my best friend. She was family. The pain of losing my wife never disappeared. It became a scar etched deep into my soul. But because of Zara, I didn't drown in it. She was the lifeline I clung to, the one who kept me afloat, the reason I could keep going for my son, and eventually for myself. So if you ask me why Zara matters so much, the answer is simple. Because when the world turned its back on me, when even I wanted to give up, she stayed. And nothing, no one, can ever take that away. There's something people don't really tell you about grief. You never really get over it. You just learn how to carry it, like a scar. The wound might close, but it never fully heals. And some days, even years later, you touch it, and the pain comes rushing back. That's what life felt like for me after losing my wife. The first months were chaos. Endless nights, empty mornings, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. I didn't cry every night anymore. I didn't wake up every morning with that crushing weight on my chest. Instead, I started to focus on the small things, the everyday routines that force me to keep moving. Making breakfast for my son, driving him to school, watching him laugh on the playground. Those tiny moments became my lifeline. My son was my first source of light after the storm. He reminded me so much of his mom, especially in the eyes. Every time he laughed, it was like a little piece of her was still here. But if my son was the first light, Zara was the one who made sure it never went out. She always seemed to know when I was at my breaking point. Some nights, just as I managed to put my son to bed, I'd get a text from her. "You eaten yet? Check your porch." I'd open the door to find a bag of hot food waiting for me. No drama, no fuss. Just Zara, quietly making sure I was okay. That's the thing about our friendship. To outsiders, maybe it looks unusual. A man and a woman, this close, with no romantic undertones. People raise their eyebrows, but they don't understand. This isn't romance. It's deeper. It's family. Zara has been my anchor since we were kids. She's the sister I never had, the person who steps in when no one else does. I'll never forget one particular night. I was sitting in my car, parked in a lot, having what I now know was a full-blown panic attack. My hands were shaking, my chest was tight, and I couldn't breathe. I didn't know who else to call, so I texted Zara. 15 minutes later, she was there. She slid into the passenger seat, handed me a bottle of water, and said in her calm, monotone voice, "Look at me, breathe, in, out, slow, count it. 1, 2, 3. I followed her lead, breath by breath, until the panic eased. That night, I didn't feel like a broken widower. I felt like someone who still had a fighting chance because I wasn't alone. Moments like that were what carried me forward. Slowly, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Spring came, and with it, change. For the first time, I planted flowers on the balcony. I bought new frames for the living room. I cooked meals that weren't just about filling our stomachs, but about creating warmth in our home. And then, something unexpected happened. I met Sarah. It was at a small get-together with friends. I wasn't looking for anything. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I knew how to hold a normal conversation with a woman anymore. But Sarah, she was different. She had this laugh that filled the room. This energy that made you feel lighter just being around her. When she talked to me, it wasn't with pity or with that careful tone people use around someone who's been through tragedy. She didn't see me as the widower. She saw me as me, and that was more healing than I can put into words. At first, I resisted it. I told myself I wasn't ready, that I would be dishonoring my wife if I let someone else into my heart. The guilt was heavy. Nights alone, I'd sit in the dark and whisper, "Am I betraying you?" But then, one night, I dreamed of her. My wife. She was standing far away, smiling, not angry, not sad, just smiling, like she wanted me to know it was okay. And in my gut, I felt it. She wanted me to be happy. She wanted our son to have a full life. That dream broke the dam, so I let Sarah in at first. It was small things, grabbing coffee, taking walks, talking late into the night. But soon, it was more. We connected over music, over our shared frustrations with work, over dreams for the future. For the first time in years, I felt that rush, that spark of connection I thought I'd never feel again. And when she met my son, he adored her immediately. Watching them laugh together, something inside me healed in a way I didn't think possible. Of course, there was still Zara. She had been such a central part of my life for so long that I worried, would she feel replaced? Would she feel like Sarah was stepping into territory that wasn't hers? But Zara just shrugged. "If she makes you happy, I'm happy for you. She's got good energy. Just make sure she treats you and your boy right." That's all that matters. It was classic Zerono drama, no judgment. Just simple, honest support. And for the first time since 2021, I let myself believe it. That maybe, just maybe, there was a new chapter waiting for me. A new light, after all the darkness. I used to think weddings brought out the best in people. The joy, the celebration, the promise of forever. But I was starting to learn they also brought out the worst, the insecurities, the power struggles, the little jealousies that grew into monsters when left unchecked. Sarah and I were 3 months into planning, and every decision felt heavier than it should have. Flowers, colors, the guest list, those were manageable. But the real weight came from the conversations we weren't having, the ones we danced around until they exploded. And almost always, those explosions had Zara's name buried somewhere in the debris. One evening, after I'd tucked my son into bed and Sarah and I were sitting on the couch with a half-empty bottle of wine between us, it all came crashing down. So, Sarah started, her tone deceptively casual. Have you thought more about who's standing next to you on the big day? I knew exactly where she was going with this. I didn't even try to play dumb. Yes, I told you I want Zara as my best woman. She's been by my side through everything. She deserves that place. Her lips pressed into a thin line. And you really think that won't send the wrong message? I set my glass down a little harder than I meant to. What message, Sarah? That I valued the people who've stood by me when life fell apart. That loyalty matters. Because that's the only message I see. No, her voice sharpened. The message people will see is that you're a man who chose another woman over your fiancée's comfort. That you can't set boundaries. That maybe there's more between you two than you're admitting. That last line landed like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened. More between us. I repeated, my voice quieter now, almost dangerous. Sarah, you know exactly what Zara means to me. She's like my sister. She's married. She's been nothing but respectful to us, and to you. How dare you suggest I dare, because it looks bad? She snapped. Her face flushed, her eyes blazing. It looks bad to everyone. You don't get how people talk, do you? My friends already think it's weird. Do you really want whispers at our wedding? People asking why your so-called best friend is the one by your side instead of, I don't know, literally any of your guy friends. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and ask why she cared so damn much about appearances, about whispers, about what people who didn't matter would say. But instead, I forced myself to breathe, to hold the anger in my chest like a hot coal and not throw it at her. Sarah, I said finally, my voice steady but heavy, this isn't about whispers. This is about you not trusting me. It's about you not respecting the bond I have with someone who's been family to me for decades. And if you can't see that, then maybe we have a bigger problem than who stands where on our wedding day. For a long moment, silence filled the room. She wouldn't look at me. Her fingers twisted the stem of her wine glass until I thought it might snap. You always make me the bad guy, she whispered finally. Do you even care about how I feel? Or is Zara the only one who matters? That hurt, because of course I cared. Of course Sarah mattered to me. I loved her. I wanted to marry her, to build a life with her. But loving her didn't mean erasing Zara, and I wasn't going to. Start our marriage by sacrificing one of the most important relationships in my life, just to make her feel better. When Sarah finally went to bed that night, I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The quiet of the house felt heavier than ever. I thought about my late wife, about how she and Zara had gotten along so effortlessly. There had never been tension, never suspicion. My wife had understood what Zara meant to me because she knew she trusted me. And she trusted our bond. And now, with Sarah, that trust felt fragile, like it was one argument away from shattering. The next day, I tried to talk to her again. I approached gently, hoping a night's sleep would soften the edges of our fight. But Sarah wasn't in the mood to soften. She was cold, clipped, distant. "I don't want to talk about this anymore," she said. "I've made my feelings clear. If you care about me, if you really want this marriage, then you'll drop it." Those words hung in the air like a threat, and I felt the weight of a choice pressing down on me. Zara, who had carried me through my darkest days. Sarah, the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Why did it have to feel like choosing one meant betraying the other? That night, after Sarah went to a friend's house, I called Zara. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. I just asked her how she was, how her husband was, how life was going. Her laughter, her warmth, her genuine concern, it reminded me why she mattered so much. And as I listened to her voice, steady and grounding, I realized this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about the kind of marriage I wanted. One built on trust, respect, and acceptance, or one built on insecurity, jealousy, and control. I wasn't sure which one Sarah was offering me anymore. The following week, the tension in our home didn't fade. If anything, it thickened like humidity before a storm. Sarah and I still went through the motions, dinner together, Netflix playing in the background, her curling up next to me at night. But there was a chill beneath it all, a sense that we were playing house instead of living in one dot. And then the whispers began. It started small, an offhand comment from one of Sarah's friends at a group dinner. "So, are you really letting her stand next to you on the big day?" The word "her" was dragged out like it had a bad taste. Everyone at the table chuckled, but the laugh didn't reach Sarah's eyes. I forced a smile, shrugged it off. Zara's been my best friend for over 20 years. "It makes sense." "Yeah, but come on," another friend chimed in. "Don't you think it's, I don't know, weird? Your wife might not like it." Sarah stayed silent, staring at her plate, and just like that, I realized she'd been talking to them. Our private arguments, our late-night fights, the words I thought lived only between you, Sarah, had carried them out into the world. And now those whispers weren't just between her and me. They were ammunition for anyone who wanted to question my choices, my character, my loyalty. That night, I confronted her. "Why are you telling people about our fights?" I asked. She blinked, all wide-eyed innocence. "They're my friends." I needed advice. Advice. I repeated, heat creeping into my voice. "Sarah, they're not neutral. They don't know me. They don't know Zara. They only know what you tell them, and now they're using it against me." Her chin lifted defiantly. "Maybe if you listened to me, I wouldn't need to talk to anyone else." That cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd been listening. I'd been listening so hard it hurt. But every time, it felt like my words bounced off her insecurities and landed nowhere. Later that week, I ran into an old college buddy, Eric, who'd been invited to the wedding. We grabbed a beer, caught up on life, and then like clockwork, he leaned across the bar with that conspiratorial grin guys get when they think they know something juicy. "So, what's the deal with Zara? Everyone's saying she's your real +1. I slammed my beer down harder than I meant to. She's my best friend, Eric. Nothing more. Nothing less. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Hey man, I believe you. But you might want to control the narrative before it controls you. Control the narrative. The phrase stuck with me. It sounded like PR strategy, not marriage advice. But maybe that was what my life was turning into, a PR nightmare I hadn't signed up for at home. Sarah and I drifted further apart. She accused me of being defensive. I accused her of not trusting me. We circled the same argument again and again, neither of us willing to yield. And in the middle of it all was Zara, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She still texted me memes, checked in on my son, invited Sarah to girls' nights. She thought she was being supportive. She didn't know that every mention of her name was gasoline on an open flame. The breaking point came 2 Saturdays later. Sarah and I attended her cousin's engagement party. It should have been a night of joy, a night to celebrate someone else's love. Instead, it became another battlefield, one of Sarah's aunts. After too many glasses of champagne, leaned close to me and whispered, "Don't let that other woman ruin your wedding, sweetheart. Everyone's talking." I froze. My stomach dropped. I glanced at Sarah, who looked away. Her jaw clenched tight. Everyone's talking. On the drive home, silence filled the car. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they hurt. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked, my voice low. "For people to think Zara's some kind of threat? For rumors to spread until I can't even breathe without defending myself?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was sharp. "No, what I wanted was a fiancée who cared more about me than about protecting another woman." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. When we got home, she went upstairs without another word. I stayed in the kitchen, the clock ticking louder than it should have, my chest tight with anger and grief. And for the first time since I met Sarah, I wondered if this wedding should even happen. Because love without trust isn't love. It's a war where both sides lose. I used to believe that the real challenges in marriage came years down the road when life threw bills, kids, and aging parents at you all at once. But I never thought the biggest challenge would come before the vows were even spoken. After the engagement party, Sarah and I barely spoke. She spent more time at work, more time with her friends, and came home later and later. I buried myself in being a dad. Our conversations became surface level, almost robotic. "How was your day?" "Fine. Did you eat?" Yeah, the kind of exchanges that sound normal but feel hollow. Then one night, everything cracked. I was cleaning up the kitchen when Sarah's iPad lit up on the counter. I don't make a habit of snooping, but the message preview hit me like a brick. Her friend had texted, "You're right. A guy that close to another woman? There's no way it's innocent. Be careful." And Sarah had replied, "I know. I think Zara's trying to wedge herself in. That whole sister act doesn't fool me. I'm not letting it happen." My stomach dropped. My hands actually shook. I wasn't just fighting Sarah's insecurity anymore, I was fighting her narrative. One she was spinning and feeding to the people around us. I called her immediately. "Do you really think Zara is trying to come between us?" I asked, my voice shaking, caught between anger and heartbreak. There was silence. Then Sarah shot back, "You went through my messages. It doesn't matter how I saw it," I said, my voice rising. What matters is that you honestly believe that you think I would betray you, that Zara would betray her husband, betray me after everything we've been through. Her voice cracked, but turned sharp. Yes, I think she's fake. I think she hides behind that best friend label, but she wants more. And you, God, you defend her every time. I'm tired of feeling like I'm competing with another woman for my own fiancée. I was stunned. Sarah, she's married. She's like my sister. I don't care. She shouted. She's not like us. She doesn't believe what we believe. She doesn't come from where we come from. I don't trust her. I don't trust any of it. And there it was. Not just jealousy, not just insecurity, but prejudice. Ugly, blunt, and undeniable. For a long time, I couldn't speak. When I finally did, my words came out low and deliberate. Sarah, I can accept that you don't like Zara. I can accept that you two don't click. But I will not accept hatred. I will not accept you dragging her down because of her background, or her voice, or the way she was raised. If you can't respect the people who've been family to me long before you, then maybe we're not ready for this marriage. On the other end, her voice cracked into sobs. So what? You're leaving me for her? No, I said quietly. I'm not leaving you for her. I just can't marry someone who doesn't trust me, who doesn't respect me. Zara is my chosen family, and someday I wanted you to be my family too. But if you're asking me to choose between the two of you, you're pushing me away yourself. The house went silent after that. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bed. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Around 3 a.m., I felt a little hand on my shoulder, my son. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, "Dad, why aren't you sleeping with Miss Sarah?" I pulled him into my arms, and I couldn't answer. My throat closed up, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't about Zara anymore. It wasn't about a wedding lineup. It was about trust, about respect, about whether love could survive when it was poisoned by suspicion and prejudice. And for the first time, I admitted to myself, maybe I had proposed too soon. Maybe I didn't know Sarah as well as I thought I did. I used to believe love could heal anything, that if two people truly loved each other, every misunderstanding, every difference would eventually soften with time. But the truth is, some cracks don't heal with time. Time only makes them wider. After that explosive argument, the air in our home felt drained of oxygen. Sarah and I lived under the same roof, but it was like we were trapped in two separate worlds that never touched. In the mornings, I'd wake early, make breakfast for my son, and drive him to school. Sarah would still be in bed, or at least pretending to be. By the time I got home, she'd already left for work. The pieces of our days rarely fit together. Sometimes we'd still try to sit down and talk, but those conversations quickly turned into a kind of courtroom, where I was the defendant and Zara's name was always Exhibit A. "Did you text her today?" Sarah would ask, tension woven into her voice. "Yes, just about work, about my son, that's all. See, don't you realize you're putting her above me? She's not your family." I'd take a long breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Sarah, I've told you. Zara is like my sister. You don't have to like her, but please don't turn this into blind jealousy." But my words felt like pebbles tossed into a void. She didn't believe me, or maybe she simply didn't want to. One night, after I'd tucked my son into bed, Sarah came into the living room holding a glass of wine. Her eyes were red, Whether from anger or alcohol, I couldn't tell. I told my mum, she said flatly. Told her what? I asked, my stomach tightening. About Zara. About how I don't trust her. About how I think she's taking advantage of you. It was like a bomb went off in my head. I knew Sarah struggled with controlling her emotions, but I never imagined she'd drag our private conflict into her family's living room. I could already picture it. Her mother's raised eyebrows, the whispered judgments from her relatives. Sarah, why would you do that? This is between us. Between us. She shot back. When has it ever been just between us? I can't carry this alone. I need people on my side. Her words left me stunned. I felt cornered on one side, Sarah, the woman I had chosen for my future. On the other, Zara, my lifelong friend who had been there through every storm. And now, our fight wasn't just ours anymore. It had been dragged into the spotlight, becoming a story for everyone else to chew on. In the days that followed, I began to notice the subtle but sharp stares, the half-jokes laced with poison. One afternoon, while picking up my son from his after-school program, a friend of Sarah's brushed past me and quipped, "Must be nice, always having a little sister around to talk to. Sarah's smart to keep an eye on you." Her words were light, almost playful, but they cut deep. I laughed awkwardly, but inside, I felt like I was being written into a script I never agreed to act in. That night, I sat on the balcony, the streetlights casting pale yellow through the railing. My phone buzzed with unread messages from Zara. "Are you okay?" I heard Sarah seemed upset. Did something happen? I didn't respond right away. Any reply, I feared, would be ammunition if Sarah saw it. But staying silent felt just as wrong. Zara had done nothing but care. She didn't deserve my silence. Finally, I typed back, "Things are tense. I'll explain later. Thanks for always checking in." The moment I hit send, dread washed over me. Even that small, harmless text could ignite another war if it fell into the wrong hands. And then came the night everything broke. It was my son's birthday. I'd planned a small party, just family and a few close friends. I thought at least on this special day, Sarah would set her feelings aside and join me in giving him the happiness he deserved. But I was wrong when Zara showed up. Gift in hand, Sarah's mask slipped almost instantly. The polite smile faded, replaced by a glare sharp enough to cut glass. In front of everyone, she looked Zara up and down and said coldly, "Isn't it strange? A so-called sister showing up at every important family moment. Don't you ever think you're crossing a line?" The room froze. Zara's face went pale, her eyes glistening, but she held her composure. She set the wrapped present gently on the table, smiled faintly, and said, "I'm sorry if my presence offends you. I'll leave." Silence swallowed the room. My son watched her walk out, confusion clouding his little face. I stood there, torn in half. Part of me wanted to chase after Zara, to tell her she had every right to be there. The other part knew that doing so would turn my son's birthday into a battlefield. When Zara disappeared through the door, I turned back to Sarah. In that moment, it hit me with crushing clarity. Some apologies will never be enough. Some fractures don't just hurt, they split you apart for good. After my son's birthday party, the house sank into a heavy silence. There were no more screaming matches, no sharp exchanges, no sarcastic remarks thrown across the room. But the silence was worse. It was the kind of silence you feel right before a storm. Everyone knows something terrible is coming, but no one knows when it will strike. Sarah barely spoke. She still got up, went to work, came home on time. But the way she looked at MIT wasn't the way someone in love looks. It was a mix of suspicion, bitterness, and resentment. As if my very presence reminded her of something she wanted to forget but couldn't. My son, poor kid, became an unwilling witness to it all. He didn't say anything, but I could see it in his eyes. He'd glance at me, then at Sarah, then lower his head in silence. He felt the tension, and it broke my heart. One night, after I put my son to bed, Sarah and I finally sat down together. The living room was lit only by the dim glow of the lamp, warm but suffocating. I knew we couldn't go on like this. Sarah, I began, my voice rough, we need to be honest. You can't keep this up forever, and I can't keep living under suspicion and coldness. She was quiet for a long time before she answered. You're right. But you also need to understand they cannot accept Zara being such a big part of your life. I don't trust her. I don't want her involved in my family. I straightened up, taking a deep breath. But Zara isn't interfering. She's just my friend. She was there for me and my son when I had nothing left. Without her, I don't even know if I would have made it. Sarah's expression tightened. That was the past. Now you have me. But instead of making me enough, you keep holding on to her like I'll never measure up. Her words cut me open. I loved Sarah. I wanted to believe she was enough, that she was the one I could build a future with. But loving Sarah didn't mean I had to erase Zara. She wasn't just some friend I could drop, she was family. In a way Sarah never seemed to understand. I can't do that, I said firmly. Zara is family to me. I won't cut her out just to make you feel secure. If you love me, you have to accept that. The room froze. Sarah stared at me, eyes shining but dry. After a long silence, she whispered, "Then I don't know if I can do this anymore." The days after felt like living in a bad dream. Sarah didn't move out, but she wasn't really there either. She became a ghost in the house, speaking to me only when necessary, keeping her distance from my son, pretending Zara didn't exist. Zara, meanwhile, stayed silent. After the birthday incident, she didn't reach out. Maybe she knew her presence only fueled the fire, but her silence left me feeling even more lost. I wanted to text her, to apologize for the humiliation she endured. Yet I knew even a single message could be gasoline on the flames with Sarah. Then, one afternoon, a text came in from Zara. Just 4 words, "Are you doing okay?" I stared at the screen, my throat tight. I wanted to reply yes, but that would have been a lie. I wanted to pour my heart out, but that would only drag her deeper into the mess. Finally, I typed back, "Things are complicated. But thank you." Almost immediately, my phone rang. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was steady. Lothar, same voice people so often mistook for cold. "I don't want to interfere, but I'm worried about you. If you ever need a place to escape, to just breathe, you know me and my husband are here." I shut my eyes, fighting back tears. In that moment, the cruel truth sank in. Zara was the person I could trust, the person I could lean on. And that was exactly why Sarah hated her so much. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. I looked at the wedding photos, still hanging on the wall, our frozen smiles staring back at me, like ghosts from a past life. I asked myself, Did we still have a future? Or was it just a beautiful illusion I'd been clinging to? My son needed a family, but he also needed peace, not a home poisoned by tension and hostility. I needed love, but I also needed the freedom to keep the people who mattered most in my life. And Zara never once asked me to choose. But Sarah had drawn a line in the sand, a line I couldn't cross. A single question echoed in my chest. Do I have the courage to choose what's right even if it means losing the woman I thought I'd marry? And for the first time, I realized I already knew the answer. After that fateful conversation with Sarah, the air in the house felt like a wire stretched to its limit, ready to snap at the slightest touch. I can still remember her, eyes no longer angry, no longer combative, just exhausted. It was as if she had already given up inside, but was still clinging to the last fragile thread of hope. The days that followed felt like living with a stranger under the same roof. I went to work, came home, cooked for my son, helped him with homework. Sarah still went about her routine, but our conversations shrank to the bare minimum, cold, polite, distant. Every word was chosen carefully, like we were walking on thin ice, terrified that the wrong step would send everything crashing down. The hardest part was watching my son. His laughter wasn't as free as before. I could see him trying to keep the peace, afraid that if he leaned too close to me or to Sarah, the other one might leave. Some nights, I heard him crying quietly in his room, and the sound tore through me in a way I can't put into words. One late evening, after putting him to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The clock ticked on the wall, steady and relentless, making the house feel even emptier. My eyes drifted to the wedding photo still hanging above the couch. We were smiling in that picture, our eyes filled with hope. But looking at it now, I barely recognized the woman beside me. My phone buzzed. It was Zara. Her text was simple. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. Since my son's birthday, I'd pulled back from talking to Zara, not wanting to give Sarah more reasons to feel threatened. But that short, gentle message made my throat tighten. I typed back, "Things are hard, but thank you for checking in." A moment later, her reply came. "If it gets too heavy, come over. You know you're always welcome here. Both you and your son." I didn't answer. I knew that if I walked out of the house that night, Sarah would see it as the end. But staying meant suffocating in a silence that was slowly killing us both. That weekend, Sarah called me into the living room. Her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "We can't go on like this," she said slowly. "I've thought a lot about it, and I can't live with Zara in the middle of us anymore. If you choose me, then you need to cut her out completely. If you can't do that, then maybe I should be the one to leave." I froze. This wasn't jealousy anymore, or even anger. It was an ultimatum, a line in the sand. I sat down, my hands clenched, sweat on my forehead. I looked at Sarah, the woman I had once believed would be my forever. And then I thought of Zara, the sister I never had, the one who cooked for me when I couldn't, who took my son out when I needed to fall apart, who had never asked for anything but had given me everything. I knew I was about to lose one of them. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the city lights, asking myself over and over, what is love worth if it means erasing someone else who matters just as much? I thought about my son. He deserved peace, stability, love. But how could I give him that when I was standing on ground that felt like it could collapse any second? By dawn, I knew. I couldn't run anymore. The next morning, I asked Sarah to sit outside with me on the porch. The sun was rising, soft and golden, the air cool against our skin. "Sarah," I began, my voice shaking, "I love you. I truly do, but Zara, she's part of who I am. Asking me to cut her out is like asking me to cut off a limb. I can't do that. And if you need me to choose between you and her, then I'm sorry. I can't choose you on those terms." Sarah looked at me for a long time. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her eyes were clearer than I'd ever seen them. "I knew," she whispered. "I've always been afraid. Afraid that your love for me would never be enough to erase your past. And maybe I was right." She stood, walked back inside, and left me on the porch with nothing but the sound of the morning birds. The following day, Sarah packed her bags. No yelling, no slamming doors, just quiet movements, folding clothes into a suitcase. She kissed my son gently on the forehead, then turned to me. "I hope you find happiness, even if it's not with me." The door clicked shut. Silence filled the house. But this time, it wasn't tense. It wasn't heavy. It was empty. But strangely, it was also peaceful. I collapsed onto the couch, buried my face in my hands, and cried harder than I had in years. I had lost love, but I had also kept a piece of myself intact. That night, I texted Zara, "It's over." Sarah left. She didn't reply right away. Minutes passed before her message appeared. "Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I didn't know if I was okay, but I knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, I had stopped running from the truth. The house became quiet against the three of us. Me, my son, and the memories that lingered in every corner. Sarah had been gone for over a week. At first, her absence left a kind of hollow ache. The empty chair at the dinner table, the half-emptied closet, the bottles of shampoo no longer lined up in the bathroom. For days, I caught myself turning toward the door, expecting her to walk in, or reaching for my phone to tell her something small. But slowly, something unexpected happened. The silence began to feel different. It was no longer suffocating, no longer heavy with judgment or unspoken resentment. It was lighter in emptiness that allowed me and my son to breathe again. The first morning after Sarah left, my son sat quietly at the table, staring into the untouched bowl of cereal in front of him. His small shoulders were hunched, his spoon resting idly in his hand. I sat down across from him, reached out, and touched his little fingers. "Hey, buddy," I said gently. "I know things are confusing right now, but don't be scared. I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here, and Zara will be here too. You haven't lost your family, you just have a family that looks a little different now." He looked up at me with eyes still damp from holding back tears. "Dad, is Sarah coming back?" That question cut through me like a knife. I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to flinch. Then I shook my head softly. "I don't think so, kiddo. But that's okay. We're going to be all right." He was quiet for a long moment, then gave a small nod. I knew the scar of this loss would take time to heal, but at least he wouldn't have to live inside a house filled with cold silence and tension anymore. As weeks passed, life slowly found its rhythm again. Work, school, dinners, bedtime routines. The ordinary things became anchors that kept us steady. And through it all, Zara and her husband showed up, just as they always had. They'd bring over home-cooked meals, drop by for movie nights, or take my son to the park so I could have a breather. One Saturday afternoon, I sat on a park bench, watching my son laugh as Zara and her husband chased him through the grass. The sound of his carefree giggles floated through the air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something inside me unclench. This was what family looked like. Maybe not the conventional picture of the wedding rings, the neat family portraits, the perfect story people expect. But this was real. Messy, imperfect, but filled with love, loyalty, and presence. I realized then that family isn't always defined by who marries whom. Family is made of the people who refuse to leave when life gets ugly. The ones who stand with you in the ruins, not just in the celebrations. One evening, Zara was in the kitchen slicing apples for my son while he finished his homework at the table. I leaned against the counter, watching her move about like she'd always belonged there. "Don't you ever get tired?" I asked suddenly. My voice was soft, but the question had been sitting heavy in my chest. I mean, of carrying me through all this, of always being the one to hold me up. She looked up, blinked, and then gave me a look like I had said the dumbest thing in the world. "Are you serious?" she said, her tone both incredulous and tender. "We've been through everything together since we were kids. You were there when I fell apart. I was there when you lost everything. That's not a burden, that's just life. That's what family does. I can't imagine my life without you or your boy in it." Her words sank into me, steadying something that had felt shaky for months. For the first time in a long time, I felt a smile tug at my lips. A real smile, not forced, not polite, just relief. The following months, I devoted myself to being a father. I took my son on hikes, joined school events, stayed up late helping with science projects. Every night, I tucked him in with a story, sometimes reading from his favorite books, sometimes making up tales about heroes who never gave up. The house, once filled with tension, began to echo with laughter again. It wasn't perfect, we still had our struggles, but it was alive, and yes, sometimes I still thought about Sarah, but not with bitterness, not even with pain, more like a quiet sadness for what could have been. We had shared beautiful moments, but love that demands you to erase part of yourself isn't really love, it's a cage. Letting her go, as hard as it was, had been a release for both of us. Then came a morning in early spring. The sunlight spilled through the window in soft gold, warming the wooden floors. I stretched, realizing something had shifted. For the first time in months, I hadn't woken up with a weight pressing down on my chest. I hadn't braced myself for conflict or rehearsed explanations in my head. I felt peace, a fragile, new kind of peace, but real. I walked into my son's room, found him still half asleep, his hair sticking out in all directions. I pulled him into my arms, breathing in the warmth of his small body. "We're going to be okay, kiddo," I whispered into his hair. "I promise," and in that moment I knew it was true. The chapter with Sarah was over. The grief was still there, yes, but so was a new beginning. A dawn not defined by loss, but by resilience. A dawn where family meant love, loyalty, and laughter, no matter how unconventional it looked from the outside.